Welcome back to the channel, my faithful few. Welcome back to the channel. I'm glad you could make it here today. I've got a nice video for you over basic camera settings. Now, if you happen to be new here and you're visiting us, I invite you to go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We've got some great content coming for you, and I hope I can be able to bring some added value to you and your content creation. In today's video, we're going to talk about basic camera settings. What I want to do is go over some of those settings that I mentioned were so important in the video that I did over how to choose the right camera. In talking about resolution, when you go into the resolution settings on your camera, you'll be able to choose whether you want to shoot at 1080p or 4K or higher. My suggestion is to always shoot in at least 4K. This is going to give you the best ability to have more control over your image. If you don't have enough resolution within that image, you can run the risk of blurring out some of your image or taking away from some of the quality. And if you have 4K, you'll have plenty of room to be able to move around. The frame rate setting is going to allow you to control what frame rate your video is going to be shot in. For right now, what I would say is you want to be at least 24 frames per second. And then if you happen to want to dive into slow motion, then go ahead and shoot at least 60 frames a second. This is going to make sure that even if you're shooting in slow motion, you don't have choppy slow motion, but you'll have smooth slow motion. So we want to make sure we can maintain our quality and detail. And we also want to make sure we can maintain smooth footage. The white balance setting is what allows you to make sure that you have accurate colors in your image. So the environment can be one color and the lighting can be one color, but you want to make sure that your skin tones are accurate. Having a correct white balance setup will give you that guarantee that you'll have minimal work on skin tones, okay? ISO controls your camera sensitivity to light. It is light that can be pulled from any light source within your camera, and the camera itself will use it to be able to increase or decrease the amount of light that you add into your image electronically. So if you don't have enough natural light, ISO will allow you to add extra light from the smallest of light sources. Now, the harder that camera has to work to increase that light, using ISO, the noisier and the grainier your image is going to be. So you really want to try to stick with increasing your ISO in more of your lower light situations. So finding the right balance of ISO is usually going to come down to more art than science. The aperture setting on your camera is what your camera uses to be able to determine the amount of depth of field that you'll have between your subject and your background. Okay, so now aperture will allow you to have some optical contrast. However, we really want to focus on making sure that that aperture is what's controlling how much of our subject is in focus and how much of our subject is blurred out in the background. That's the main purpose of aperture, but it can also be used in the exposure triangle, because the wider your aperture is, the more light it's going to allow into your camera. The shallower your aperture is, the less light that will be allowed into your camera. Now, your shutter speed is what determines how long your sensor is exposed to light. So a longer shutter speed means that your sensor will be exposed to light for a longer period of time, which means that the motion that's captured by the camera will either be blurred or it'll also have a lot more light. Now, the higher your shutter speed, the less light that's going to be allowed into the camera. This is a setting that you can actually use to be able to freeze motion. So we typically will have our shutter speed twice the speed of our frame rate. The focus system and the focus settings, you'll either have your autofocus or you'll have manual focus. If you're running an autofocus system, depending on your camera, is going to really kind of determine just how well that autofocus system works. There's some cameras that have a good autofocus system, and there's some cameras that don't have a good autofocus system. I typically use manual focus, but what I'll say is, experiment with both. The more you begin to focus manually, the more you'll be able to focus manually and be confident with it. With autofocus, there's always that chance that your camera is going to skip around in terms of your images, and you just never know what you're going to actually get when you get back in to be able to go over your your footage. But with manual focus, you are in control of the focus. So you have to begin to get some reps in with moving and also making sure to keep your subjects in focus. Most cameras come with picture profiles, and some of your higher up and more advanced cameras, they will come with what's called LUTs or built-in LUTs, or they will allow you to add LUTs into your camera so that you can be able to get a preview on your viewfinder or on your monitor or your video recorder with how your image is going to look in post. But some of your earlier on and some of your more prosumer type cameras will have a picture profile. It may be flat, neutral, standard, color, black and white, monochrome, things like that. The one thing that I'll tell you is that you just have to be careful with that, because if you use a picture profile on most cameras, it will go ahead and bake that actual look into your footage. And so if you shoot in monochrome and you go into edit, you will not have any color information. You will be editing a monochrome image. Get next to your audio settings. I like to tell people all the time, you can't break it. There's always a reset to default. If you feel like some settings that you're modifying or changing are going to damage your camera, for the most part, they're not. You just being able to go in, you're going to have to be able to get next to your settings. So your audio settings, learn about your audio inputs, learn what levels will make for good audio for you and for your particular purpose. Custom buttons and presets are ways you can be able to make shooting become more efficient for you. If you have settings and go-to settings that you have for different types of situations, you can set those up, and once you set them, there's usually a way you can be able to save those settings as a preset. Some cameras have 1 or 2 presets, other cameras have 5 or 6. But that's a wrap. I wanted to make this video short and to the point, so that way you could be able to at least figure out and know what these different settings are, so that you could have more control over the output of your image. Just make sure that you're able to go in, set your resolution, set your frame rate, set your shutter speeds, your ISO, your white balance. If you're going to use a picture profile, get it, set it, know it. Make sure you check your audio settings, and then you're good to go. These are settings that you're going to use each and every time you pick up your camera. So go ahead and switch that button from auto to manual. Modify the settings. Go out and shoot something. That's the only way to get better at this thing. I hope that this video has brought some added value to you and your content creation. What I will do is I'm going to do a video over these different settings individually, where we'll take another deep dive into the actual settings, so that way we can make sure we can get a masterful control over these individual settings. If it did, please consider subscribing. Come back and visit the channel. I promise we're getting ready to go in.